There is someone who considers himself or herself a conservative in the state of New York, who, God forbid, finds themselves in a courtroom where you're wearing a robe. What comfort do you think that litigant would have that you described the hatred of conservatives, the righteous indignation, the anger at conservatives as a tremendous source of power for you personally? How does that possibly give anyone comfort that you would be a fair and impartial judge?
Calling the Republican Party an anti-democratic virus.
Yes, it's very different, and I don't believe I used those words, Senator.
Right. If you did use those words, will you pull down your nomination?
Senator, I don't believe I've used those words.
But if you did.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today we break down what happens when a federal judicial nominee can't give a straight answer under oath. Dale Ho, a nominee backed by Democrats, just went through a grilling session with Senators Kennedy and Cruz that should concern every American who believes in blind justice. From past tweets dripping with partisanship to dodging basic questions about judicial fairness, this hearing was packed with red flags. Today, I'm breaking it down into must-know takeaways from the Senate hearing, in plain English. If you care about the future of our courts and the judges who sit on them, you're going to want to stick around. Let's get into it.
Yourself as a, quote, wild-eyed sort of leftist. Do I have that right?
Senator, I think I was referring to a caricature of the way that I think other people may have described me, not how I would describe myself. And I want to assure you that I understand that the role of a judge is to set aside whatever personal views that person may have.
I heard your testimony. Have you called Republicanism, well, strike that. Did you say, quote, Republicanism is an anti-democratic virus?
No, Senator, I don't believe I've used those words.
Okay, you're under oath now.
Yes, Senator, I don't believe I've used those words.
Okay.
I do remember saying last year that there was a loss of confidence in our elections that has spread kind of like a virus.
Right, well, that's a long way from calling the Republican Party an anti-democratic virus.
Yes, it's very different, and I don't believe I used those words, Senator.
Right. If you did use those words, will you pull down your nomination?
Senator, I don't believe I've used those words.
But if you did, will you withdraw?
It's hard for me to imagine a scenario in which
But
I would
I'm just
use
saying,
those
assume
words.
it. If you said it, will you withdraw?
If I were quoting someone else saying it to describe that kind of sentence, I wouldn't be expressing my own views. But Senator, I don't believe I've ever used those words. I've represented.
Did you when you sent out those personal tweets about Senator Cotton, Senator Blackburn, and Senator Cornyn? Did you mean them at the time?
Without hearing those tweets, Senator Kennedy, it's hard for me to remember precisely, what was said or what I was thinking at the time. I do very much regret the tone that I've taken on social media from time to time. I know that I've crossed the line from time to time, and
When you crossed the line, did you mean it?
Without knowing the specific context or the specific tweet that you're referring to, Senator Kennedy, it's kind of hard for me to say, but
Do you generally tweet things you don't mean?
Senator Kennedy, I would agree with you that Twitter has become a very coarse place.
I don't want to debate Twitter. Do you generally tweet things that you don't mean?
Well, Senator Kennedy, I've contributed to the coarseness on Twitter sometimes by pushing the envelope to break
But
through.
when you did it, did you mean it?
It's hard for me to respond to that kind of generally, Senator Kennedy, without a specific
You're a smart
example.
guy. Sure you can. You either meant it or you didn't. You got two choices, door A, door B.
Well, Senator Kennedy, I know that I've pushed the envelope.
Okay.
And
Do you regret it?
I do regret it, Senator.
Do you
Kennedy.
regret it because you didn't mean it? Or do you regret it because it might cause you not to be confirmed?
Senator Kennedy, I regret it because I think it's contributed to the coarseness of our discourse overall, and I think it would be
When
better.
did you have this epiphany that everybody has equal dignity and worth? When you were nominated, or
Well, I believe you're.
including Republicans?
Well, I believe you're referring to my religious faith.
No, I'm not.
Senator.
I'm referring to your coarseness.
Well, the equal dignity and worth is a principle of my religious faith, Senator.
It's also a principle of morals and good judgment. I'm over. Mr. Ho, you're a smart man, I can tell. But I think you're an angry man. And I really have great concerns about voting for you. We don't need federal judges who are angry. We need federal judges who are fair and can see both points of view.
So in the last 12 months, you have engaged, or the last about 18 months, you have engaged in partisan attacks on multiple members of this committee. But you also wrote in November 2017, quote, "In these dark times, I've been fortunate to find tremendous sense of purpose in my work as a civil rights lawyer. But as a colleague of mine asked me over lunch recently, Dale, do you do this because you want to help people or because you hate conservatives?" What he was getting at is that anger can, in fact, be a tremendous source of power. For me, righteous indignation can provide a sense of moral clarity and motivate the long hours needed to get the work done. But it's only a short-term burst. It's not sustaining in the long run. Mr. Ho, if you wake up and are Judge Ho, and I recognize that New York is a blue state, but imagine there is someone who considers himself or herself a conservative in the state of New York, who, God forbid, finds themselves in a courtroom where you're wearing a robe. What comfort do you think that litigant would have that you described the hatred of conservatives, the righteous indignation, the anger at conservatives, as a tremendous source of power for you personally? How does that possibly give anyone comfort that you would be a fair and impartial judge?
Thank you, Senator Cruz, for giving me an opportunity to address this. As I mentioned to some other members of the committee, this was a comment that I made in church where I was relaying a joke that someone else had told, the point of which was that that kind of temporary sugar rush from being angry at someone, while it can feel powerful in a moment, it's not the kind of thing that is sustaining for a human being in the long run. That at the end of the day, if you want to do good work in the world, it has to come from a different place, a place of love for your fellow person. And that's what I was trying to convey to my fellow congregants at my church.
Well, that's not what you said. And what you said is you described hatred and righteous indignation directed at conservatives. And I would note that that's a pattern that also continues. You know, a minute ago you talked about how you're dedicated to equality. And I will say, looking at your record, that is not in fact the case. Your record instead is a partisan view. So, for example, you are a graduate of the Yale Law School. The Yale Law School has an open policy of discriminating against Asian Americans. One of the first things that Joe Biden's Justice Department did was dismiss the investigation against Yale because today's Democratic Party believes discriminating against Asian Americans in admissions is an acceptable form of bigotry. Do you agree with the Biden administration on that?
Senator Cruz, I haven't followed the ins and outs of what the Biden administration has done with respect to that particular matter. What I can tell you,
Do you agree with your alma mater's policy of discriminating against Asian Americans in admissions?
Well, Senator Cruz, I'm a member of the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association. I try to do what I can in the Asian American legal community. I'm not aware of a particular policy of discrimination in admissions at Yale Law School. But I think to your larger question, Senator Cruz, I clerked for judges who were appointed by executives of different parties. They set an example for me that politics, you can have political views, but they don't have a role on the bench. And I would look to follow their examples.
Well, your record
straight answer.
suggests
Instead, we
precisely
got vague regrets and a few well-rehearsed talking points, and that infamous quote about hatred fueling his work. He brushed it off as a church anecdote, claiming it was a joke to illustrate how anger isn't sustainable. Let me ask you, when's the last time you heard a church joke about hating conservatives? The senators weren't just concerned about his words, they were concerned about his temperament. Senator Kennedy, in particular, zeroed in on Ho's anger. "We don't need angry judges," he said. "We need fair judges who can see both points of view." And he's right. Then came a bombshell from Senator Cruz, questioning Ho on Yale Law School's alleged discrimination against Asian Americans, and the Biden administration's decision to drop the investigation. Ho said he hadn't followed the issue closely. Think about that. A civil rights lawyer who graduated from Yale, saying he hasn't paid attention to a major discrimination case involving his own alma mater? That's not just a weak answer. It's a huge red flag. Judges aren't activists. They're not there to promote an agenda. They're there to apply the law, equally. And if we're being honest, Ho's record doesn't show someone willing to do that. It shows a pattern of deep partisanship, selective outrage, and carefully worded denials. This is exactly why judicial nominations matter. They shape the legal system for decades. One biased judge in the wrong courtroom can tilt the scales of justice for hundreds, even thousands, of people. And hey, if you're finding this breakdown helpful, click that subscribe button right now. It helps more people find this content and keeps you in the loop on critical issues like this. Let's hold power accountable, together. Here's the bottom line. From dodging questions and past controversial tweets to vague answers about discrimination and admitted partisanship, Dale Ho's hearing raised more questions than answers. We need fair, calm, impartial judges, not activists in robes. This isn't about left versus right, it's about right versus wrong when it comes to the integrity of our courts. Let me know what you think in the comments. Should Dale Ho be confirmed, or is this nomination too risky for the judiciary? As always, thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay skeptical, and keep thinking freely.